The date is the 8th of February 2026, and the winter sky over Highgrove House is a bruised purple, heavy with the threat of snow. Inside the limestone walls of his beloved sanctuary, King Charles III sits at a desk cluttered with watercolors, gardening journals, and the weight of a thousand-year-old institution. For 6 long, punishing years, the monarch has held the line. Through the explosive Oprah interview that accused his family of racism, through the 6-part Netflix docuseries that mocked the traditions he holds sacred, through the endless Spotify podcasts, and finally, through the blistering, scorched-earth pages of the memoir Spare, the king has adhered to the golden rule of his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II. Never complain, never explain. He has absorbed the blows with a stoicism that frustrated his supporters and emboldened his critics. He has endured the ridicule of being portrayed as an emotionally stunted father, a cold husband, and a weak leader. He has watched his own son describe him as a man trapped in a gilded cage, incapable of love or logic. The world assumed that Charles, the sentimental man who talks to his plants and keeps a teddy bear in his study, would never strike back. They assumed his silence was a symptom of weakness, a sign that he was afraid of his son's wrath. They were wrong. Tonight, the silence has ended. But it did not end with a shout, a press conference, or a televised address from the throne room surrounded by gilt and velvet. It ended with a whisper that has reverberated around the world with the force of a thunderclap. In a move that historians are already calling the most significant royal intervention since the abdication of Edward VIII in 1936, King Charles has issued a personal, handwritten missive dubbed the Highgrove Letter that definitively draws the curtain on the House of Sussex. This isn't a sterile press release drafted by high-priced London lawyers trying to bill by the hour. It is a eulogy for a relationship that is legally alive, but emotionally dead. The king has not just spoken out, he has said goodbye. To understand the magnitude of this moment, we must look at the setting. The letter was not released from Buckingham Palace, the seat of corporate monarchy, the office where the firm does business. It was released from Highgrove, Charles's private sanctuary in Gloucestershire. This distinction matters deeply. It signals that this is not a statement from the sovereign to a subject. It is a statement from a father to a son. But the content is devastating in its finality. For the first time, Charles addresses the phantom pain of losing Harry, the cold financial reality of their separation, and the one specific unforgivable betrayal that made reconciliation impossible. The world thought the issue was Meghan. The world thought the issue was race, or security, or the press. But Charles has revealed that the red line was drawn years ago, over a single name, Camilla. The Camilla line is the emotional core of this revelation, the wound that refused to heal. In his memoir Spare, Harry did not just criticize his stepmother, he launched a character assassination. He described her as dangerous, a villain who left bodies in the street to rehabilitate her image. He accused her of leaking stories to the press to sacrifice him on her PR altar, trading his reputation for her own acceptance. For Charles, who spent decades fighting a war of attrition for Camilla's acceptance, who loves her with a devotion that defies protocol and public opinion, this was the unforgivable sin. Sources close to the king say that he could have forgiven the attacks on himself. He is used to being mocked. He has the thick skin of a man who waited 70 years to be king, a man who was the villain of the 1990s. But he could not and would not forgive the public assassination of his wife's character. In the letter, Charles reportedly writes with a trembling hand, "I have borne the arrows aimed at my own heart with patience. But I cannot ask the woman who stands beside me to endure the same. It is a gentleman's defense of his lady, but it is also a king's defense of his consort." By attacking Camilla, Harry didn't just insult his father's wife, he attacked the Queen of the United Kingdom. He turned a family dispute into an act of treason against the dignity of the crown. Charles realized that as long as Harry had a platform, as long as he was welcomed back into the fold, Camilla would never be safe from his narrative. And so, to protect the Queen, the king had to sacrifice the prince. This decision was not made lightly. It was made with the heavy heart of a man who knows that his primary duty is no longer to his children, but to the woman who wears the crown beside him. This defense of Camilla is also a defense of history. Charles knows the cost of the past. He knows the damage inflicted during the War of the Waleses in the 1990s. He has spent the last 20 years carefully rebuilding the reputation of the monarchy and integrating Camilla into the fabric of national life. When Harry attacked her, he wasn't just venting childhood trauma. He was attempting to unravel 2 decades of institutional work. He was trying to drag the monarchy back into the mud of the past. Charles, looking at his legacy, realized he could not allow his reign to be defined by his son's inability to accept his father's happiness. The letter makes it clear that Harry's view of Camilla is a distortion, a fairy tale villain construct created by a man who refuses to see the complexity of adult relationships. By drawing this line, Charles is engaging in a final act of chivalry, telling the world that his wife is off limits, even to his own blood. But there is a second, darker layer to this announcement, one that peels back the curtain on the financial reality of the Sussex exodus. For years, Harry and Meghan have claimed they were cut off financially in the first quarter of 2020, literally left without security or support. They use this narrative to justify their multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify, claiming they had to sell their secrets to pay for their safety. Charles has finally, brutally, corrected the record. The audit attached to the statement, prepared by the keeper of the Privy Purse, reveals that the Bank of Pa remained open far longer than anyone knew. It details millions of pounds in transitional support that flowed from the Duchy of Cornwall to Montecito well into the summer of 2021. It outlines the settlement of debts, the coverage of security costs during the transition, and the personal gifts that were sent to help them set up their new life. The revelation is stark. Harry wasn't cut off, he was weaned off, and he resented every moment of it. Charles's statement implies that the demands for money never truly stopped. There were phone calls, angry, desperate, pleading, demanding cash for security, for houses, for lawsuits against the British government. Charles describes a relationship that devolved from father-son to banker-client. "I became not a parent to be consulted," the letter implies, but a resource to be mined. The emotional toll of being treated as an ATM by the son you carried on your shoulders, the son you walked behind a coffin with, is the subtext of every line. Charles isn't angry about the money itself. He is wealthy enough to absorb the loss. He is heartbroken that the money became the only language they spoke, that every interaction was transactional, every call a negotiation. The forensic accounting included in the supplementary briefing notes is damning. It shows a pattern of financial entitlement that continued even as the Sussexes were publicly trashing the family. It reveals requests for reimbursement for designer clothing, for private jet travel, for the maintenance of a lifestyle that far exceeded the budget of a non-working royal. By publishing this, Charles is dismantling the victim narrative. He is showing the world that the Sussexes were not refugees fleeing a burning building. They were heavily subsidized immigrants who complained about the quality of the golden parachute. This financial transparency is a weapon. It destroys the argument that Harry had no choice but to sell his family out. It proves he had options, he had support, and he simply wanted more. The catalyst for this final severance, the moment the king finally decided to pick up his pen, allegedly occurred during a secret, failed meeting in late 2025. We are calling it the Sandringham Summit 2. It was a rainy Tuesday in November. Harry had flown into the UK for legal reasons regarding his privacy cases and requested 10 minutes with his father. Charles agreed, against the advice of Prince William and his senior aides, who warned him it was a trap. The meeting took place in a small drawing room at Sandringham, a room filled with memories of Christmas past. Witnesses say Harry arrived looking agitated, clutching a dossier of evidence against the press in the palace, demanding an apology. He wanted an acknowledgement of his trauma. He wanted the king to intervene in his security lawsuits against the Home Office. Charles, frail from his recent health battles but clear-eyed, reportedly looked at his youngest son and saw a stranger. He didn't see the darling boy who used to play pranks at Highgrove or the soldier who served in Afghanistan. He saw a man consumed by bitterness, a man who had been hollowed out by his own crusade for vengeance. The conversation lasted less than 12 minutes. Charles realized that no apology would ever be enough to fill the void in Harry's soul. He realized that Harry wasn't looking for peace, he was looking for submission. Charles stood up, reportedly said, "I wish you well, Harry," and walked out of the room. He didn't look back. That was the moment the father died and the king took over completely. It was the moment he accepted that the son he loved existed only in the past tense. It was the realization that you cannot reason with someone who is living in a different reality. This meeting was the final straw because it proved that Harry had learned nothing. After years of separation, after the illness of the king and the Princess of Wales, Harry still arrived with a list of demands rather than a heart full of concern. He did not ask about his father's health, he asked about his own security status. He did not ask about Catherine, he asked about why the press was mean to Meghan. This narcissism, this inability to see beyond his own grievance, was the clarity Charles needed. He realized that Harry is stuck in a loop of trauma and recrimination, and if Charles didn't cut the cord, the monarchy would be dragged into that loop forever. The tragedy of the grandchildren, Archie and Lilibet, is the heaviest shadow in the king's statement. Charles is a man who dotes on his grandchildren. He builds tree houses for George, Charlotte, and Louis. He reads them stories, he teaches them about nature, but Archie and Lilibet are ghosts to him. He has met Lilibet once, briefly, during the Platinum Jubilee. He knows them only through grainy photos and the occasional awkward Zoom call that feels more like a hostage proof-of-life video than a family chat. In the letter, Charles alludes to the pain of this separation. He writes of a missing generation, a branch of the family tree that has been grafted onto a foreign soil, cut off from its roots. He accepts, with a heavy heart, that he will likely never know them. He will never teach Archie to fish at Balmoral. He will never watch Lilibet ride a pony at Windsor. Meghan's decision to keep the children in California, to use them as anchors for her American life, has deprived the king of a relationship. But Charles refuses to beg. He refuses to negotiate for access to his own blood, knowing that any concession would be used as PR fodder. They are loved, he says, but they are lost to us. It is an admission of defeat that is more painful than any anger could be. He is mourning the living, grieving for children who are alive but unreachable, separated not by death, but by a flight path and a non-disclosure agreement. He also expresses a profound sadness for the children themselves, who are growing up without their cousins, without their history, and without the protection of the institution they were born into. He sees them as collateral damage in their parents' war. Then there is the William factor. For years, Charles has been the buffer between the brothers. He was the one urging William to be patient, to keep the door open, to not burn the bridge completely. But in this final statement, Charles effectively passes the sword to the Prince of Wales. He acknowledges that the future of the monarchy belongs to William, and that William's ruthless pragmatism is what is needed to survive the Sussex era. Charles is stepping back from the fight, allowing William to enforce the new boundaries. He is admitting that his soft-hearted approach has failed. "My son William," Charles reportedly writes, "carries the weight of the future. He must do what is necessary to secure it. This is a permission slip." It is the king telling the heir, "You can strip the titles. You can close the archives. You can remove them from the website. You can do what I, as a father, could not bring myself to do." It is the king admitting that his generation's way of handling things, the soft power, the ambiguity, the hope for reconciliation has failed with Harry. The next reign will be harder, sharper, and completely closed to Montecito. It is a strategic alignment that ensures the monarchy speaks with one voice, and that voice says enough. It signals to the world that the good cop is retiring and the bad cop is taking charge. This decision was also accelerated by the king's own mortality. His recent cancer diagnosis and treatment have fundamentally shifted his perspective. When you stare into the abyss, you stop tolerating the petty dramas of life. The cancer clarity has stripped away the king's patience for nonsense. He wants to spend his remaining years, however many they may be, focused on the people who show up, the people who serve, and the work that matters. He does not want to spend his twilight years fighting a PR war with his son in California. He wants peace, and he has realized that the only way to get peace is to amputate the limb that is causing the pain. He needs to conserve his energy for the state, not waste it on a soap opera. The diagnosis taught him that time is the one luxury a king cannot afford to waste. The implementation of this new institutional firewall is already underway. Palace aides have been instructed to block calls from Montecito. Emails are being routed to legal teams rather than family members. The physical separation is now mirrored by a digital and administrative blockade. There will be no more courtesy calls for birthdays. There will be no more advance notice of family health updates. Harry will find out about the monarchy's moves at the same time as the general public. He has been demoted from a member of the family to a member of the audience. This isn't just about cutting contact. It's about closing the loop of information that the Sussexes have monetized for years. If they don't know what's happening inside the palace, they can't sell the story to Netflix. The public reaction to the king's silence breaking has been a mixture of shock and relief. For years, the British public has wanted the king to defend himself. They wanted him to correct the lies, to stand up for Camilla, to show some steel. Now that he has, the mood is somber. There is no triumph in seeing a father say goodbye to his son. There is only the realization of the immense damage that has been done. The Sussex Squad online is spinning this as an act of aggression, claiming the king is leaking against Harry, accusing him of being a toxic parent. But the broader consensus in the UK and increasingly in the US is that this is an act of closure. It is the final scene of a tragedy. The king's statement is not an attack. It is a boundary. It is a line drawn in the sand of history. He is saying this far and no further. He is protecting the institution from the slow erosion of Harry's complaints. He is protecting his wife from the vitriol of Harry's book. And he is protecting his own sanity. He is choosing to focus on the son who stayed, the son who serves, and the grandchildren who are growing up in the shadow of the throne. He is choosing the monarchy over the man. It is the ultimate fulfillment of his coronation oath. There is also a strategic element to this timing. Charles knows that the Sussex brand is failing. The Hollywood deals are drying up. The public interest is waning. By speaking now, he is driving the final nail into the coffin of their royal status. He is delegitimizing their rival court in Montecito. Without the connection to the king, without the will they, won't they tension of reconciliation, Harry and Meghan lose their currency. They become just two celebrities in a mansion. Charles has removed the oxygen from the room. He has taken away the narrative tension that fueled their Netflix deals. By saying goodbye, he has made them irrelevant. He has turned off the tap of royal glamour that they have been drinking from for years. As the sun sets over Highgrove, Charles walks in his garden. This is the place where he finds God, where he finds peace, where he talks to the trees. He walks past the saplings he planted for William and Harry when they were boys, decades ago. One tree is tall, strong, and deeply rooted in the English earth. The other is thriving, perhaps, but it is growing in a different forest, unrecognizable to the man who planted it, twisted by winds the king cannot control. The king stops, touches the bark of the tree, and continues his walk. The burden of the crown is heavy, but the burden of a lost son is heavier still. Yet, he carries it. He has no choice. He has spoken. The king has said his piece. And in the silence that follows, the message is clear to everyone, especially to the man in California. You wanted to be independent. You wanted to be free. You are free from the family, free from the duty, and free from the love that you threw away. The king has closed the book. The reign of Charles III will continue, focused on unity, service, and the future. But the story of Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, has been moved to the archives, filed under tragedy. The king moves on, alone but resolute, into the winter of his life, leaving the door locked behind him. The era of waiting for Harry is over. The era of the king has truly begun. The implications of this letter will be felt for generations. It sets a precedent that blood is not thicker than duty. It establishes that the crown is not a family business that can be abused, but a sacred trust that must be protected. By cutting off Harry, Charles has strengthened the monarchy, proving that it can survive the loss of a key member if that member threatens the integrity of the whole. It is a lesson in leadership that William has absorbed fully. The Highgrove letter will be studied by historians as the moment the modern monarchy decided that survival required ruthlessness. Meanwhile, in Montecito, the reaction is one of chaos. The victim narrative relied on the palace being the aggressor, the silencer. But by speaking with such sorrow and finality, Charles has stripped them of that defense. He hasn't attacked them, he has mourned them. And it is very hard to fight against grief. Meghan's team is scrambling to find a response, but what can you say to a father who says, "I love you, but I cannot know you"? The chess game is over. The king has toppled his own king to save the board, and Harry is left holding a pawn, wondering where the game went. This is the end of the road. There will be no more summits, no more leaks about olive branches, no more will they, won they for the coronation or the Jubilee. The line is cut. The phone is off the hook. The king is busy, and Prince Harry is finally truly on his own. The silence from London is no longer a tactic. It is a reality. And it is the loudest sound Harry has ever heard. It is the sound of a door closing that will never open again. It is the sound of consequences arriving, late but undeniable. The king has chosen his queen, his heir, and his realm, and in doing so, he has let go of the son who chose himself. The grief will remain, etched into the stone of the palace walls, but the paralysis is over. The monarchy moves forward, leaving the past where it belongs, in the history books, not in the headlines.